because traceability is so important actually for food safety. And why traceability becomes so important nowadays? Because we have a whole bunch of global supply chain issue. For example, as you can see, we have all kind of news all around the world, which people are faking the goods. You have like all kind of food frauds, and then you also have problem that people are mislabeling on the products. So also, you can no longer trust the information on the packaging because people can counterfeit the packaging. They can put fraudulent item inside the packaging, but they still advertise as their product. So this is what happened. So it's important to know the traces of the product where it's coming from. At the same time, you might have to monitor the process because there will be contamination inside the processes because things might be transported in the wrong way or it could be produced in the wrong way that have mixed with contamination. So these are all the processes that need to be traced. And also unauthorized use of certification and logo. For example, whether you are a GMP product or whether you are a halal product, for a lot of people, this is just artwork. They can just print whatever they want on the packaging. They sell to the market, but for consumer, they are not able to verify. So why traceability becomes so important nowadays is also because of all kinds of food safety issues that have been happening all around the world. At the same time, because the topic, besides covering food safety, we are also covering sustainability. And because of a lot of countries, they are all talking about sustainability nowadays, I think it's a very common word, ESG, and we are looking into it. So in order to build a sustainable and resilient supply chain, many people have to start adopting ESG. So what ESG means? So ESG have three words, which is environmental, social, and governance. So environmental will be issues like whether your product is coming from any places that have environmental issue. For example, one of the famous things is called the EUDR, it's the EU Deforestation Regulation, which I think for Thailand, I think one of the major will be on the rubber. Because for Malaysia, we have the sawit, which is the major thing, but I think for Thailand, the rubber will become one of the issue for EUDR because they want to know whether it's coming from deforestation or not. So environmental become very important. And second thing will be on social. Social will be things like whether you use your forced labor or you undertreated your employees. They want to know whether your raw material, whether coming from the places that have forced labor, things like that. So that it becomes social. And eventually governance will be all the rules, whether you comply to your own country's rules or whether you are actually not complying to the rules of an importing country. So all the rules need to comply, and this constitutes to the whole picture of ESG. However, how do you know this? Then you need to do your sustainability checking throughout the supply chain. So now, as you can see, to do the traceability is no longer your own task and not your own duty, because in the sustainability context and in the sustainability reporting, they actually require you to do scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3. So what it means is, scope 1 is everything that you do. So within your factory, how you process your thing, how you do your thing, how you want to do the thing. Many companies might be able to trace whatever is already inside your own factory, but now they are requesting for scope 2 and scope 3. So what scope 2 means is, you need to track your direct supplier and then your direct buyer. So you need to know how much your direct supplier involved in the supply chain, if they supply something to you, whether this is sustainable or not. And you even need to know whether their sources are sustainable or not, so it becomes a challenge. And the worst is, now they are actually requesting scope 3. Scope 3, which means is the entire supply chain, which means it might trace all the way to tier 6 of your supplier, which means it can be coming from where the raw material is, who actually produced raw material, how it is being processed, and how it is actually transferred to you until you make a product. which means everything along the supply chain that you need to do reporting. So that is why traceability is become so important, because if not everybody are having the traceability needed for each of them, so it will be impossible for you to get scope 3. So that is the reality that everybody now need to do a certain level of traceability if they want to be part of the supply chain. And as you can see, there are all kinds of regulation that is already in place all around the world for the traceability that we need, for the sustainability that we need to achieve. For example, from the scope 3, these are just some examples that are listed now. Then there could be more. So all the regulations have come out, which is coming 2026, 2037, 2030, 2035, 2040. People are coming up with all kinds of regulation, asking supply chain to be transparent and then to be able to report on the traceability. At the same time, if you are having some situation, people have been talking about carbon footprint. So nowadays, as we mentioned just now, also the previous speaker was talking about monitoring the carbon footprint. So now we have the technology to monitor the carbon footprint within your own organization. For example, you use how many electricity, you actually do what kind of process, you have your carbon footprint. However, in order for you to calculate the carbon footprint of the total product, then you must have traceability. Because as we mentioned just now, the traceability will help you to identify your raw material from where your product, from where the raw material are, who actually process it, who actually do the transportation, who actually make it into end product, then eventually who do the packaging, who do the retails until it goes to customers. So each of the point will actually contribute to the total carbon footprint of the products. So in order for you to do what we call the carbon reduction in the supply chain, then the only way for us is to know exactly where our things are coming from. So when we know where our thing is coming from, only they are able to know, maybe from your supplier, they can provide you information on how much carbon they have produced. Because to take one example, right now, a lot of companies, they are calculating their sustainability or carbon footprint by the ESG software in the market. But maybe many of you will observe, now the ESG software are using a formula only. So for example, you use electricity, how many wattage, then times a factor. Or you use plastic. So for example, you use plastic, you buy how many tons of plastic times a factor. So if you only have this, then regardless you buy plastic from supplier A and supplier B or supplier C, your carbon is always the same. Because you are not able to differentiate whether supplier A is a better supplier because they have lower carbon, or supplier B is a company that have lower carbon. Because there is no way for you to trace. So your carbon is always the same, regardless of whether you change your supplier, also the same. But however, it's still very challenging for the supply chain to do this unless everybody are working together. When everybody are working together, then the traceability along the supply chain is become very important. At the same time, I think everybody now looking into what we call circular economy. So previously, let's say you are a Coca-Cola manufacturer. So long time ago, Coca-Cola just produced a can of Coca-Cola. They sell to the market, then they can forget about it already. Because after they sell to the market, it's none of their business anymore. But now, because of the circular economy, after they sell the Coca-Cola to the market, then they need to start thinking about my aluminum can will become a pollution. How much do I need to recycle back the aluminum can? Then whether I'm using enough aluminum can to recycle into my product. So this will become a challenging question for the industry, especially when people talking about how to say the EPR reporting. So when you have the EPR reporting, so then you need to report in my the bottle or the aluminum can that I'm actually producing, how much I have recycled back. And then the even more strict is they call it they actually implement something called closed loop circular economy. Closed loop circular economy, what it means is if you are producing aluminum can for beverage, I'm using recycled aluminum can for my beverage, but the recycled aluminum can not coming from other industry. It has to be from beverage itself. Because if I'm actually recycling a whole bunch of aircraft aluminum, then I put it into recycle, but the waste that is generated from the beverage can is still somewhere around the world. So you can't claim I have actually recycled plastic, I recycled the plastic or recycled aluminum, because what you have recycled is not from what you have created. So when this happens, then circular economy becomes more challenging for the industry in order to work. So just to make your product to be recyclable or make your packaging to be recyclable become not enough. You not only have to make sure your packaging is recyclable, then you also need to make sure it is being recycled. If not, then you don't have the percentage to report to the circular economy that I'm actually coming from. So all these things require the cooperation of the whole industry and require some reporting and traceability needed for the circular economy. Okay. And the thing about this is all these things like carbon footprints or circular economy is no longer an idea. People already stopped talking about the idea. Actually, they already put it into mandate. So many countries have put this into regulatory mandate. They actually set up the laws and regulations that the manufacturing and supply chain need to comply at a certain deadline. So everybody has set some deadline for everybody to comply. And the regulation has been strengthened all around the world. For example, this is some example for the rubber. The EU deforestation law actually have implemented starting this year. So everything you go to Europe need to report on the UDR, which will require you to report on the polygon of the land. So how much have been produced on that land, all need to be reported accordingly. So if you can't report accordingly, then they can reject your product if you are not complying with the UDR. At the same time, not only commodity, so in certain countries, especially Europe, I think this morning one of the speakers also mentioned about the digital passport. So for all the garments, clothing, I think Thailand also have a big industry in clothing. Also need to do traceability to report on the garments and also the apparel industry, which they will actually, if your garment is actually not compliant to the sustainability, then you might have issue because for this country they see garments as a consumable. It also produces a lot of waste. So because people buy clothing, they throw the clothing. If this thing is not recycled, then the waste will keep on generated. So this has become a problem itself. And also, just now as you mentioned, there are a lot of food safety issues. So people are also looking into different kind of regulation strengthening on food and beverage supply chain. So these are just some, but not limited to every circular. For example, you have the EU deforestation law, you have the carbon footprint regulation, you have the seafood traceability regulation, you have the United States Food Safety Modernization Act, FS 2204. All these regulations require company to do traceability. So if a company is not doing traceability, so eventually what the consequences, it could be financial losses because your product, your container reach the location, reach the importing country, but they actually reject, and then you have to return the whole product. That will be reputational losses and also financial losses in whatever they do. So this is something that will be tough for a lot of companies. So that's why company will need to do traceability as early as possible to avoid, as we mentioned, being frozen out of supply chain. Because sooner or later, everybody need to comply to the traceability. So if you are not doesn't have any traceability in your supply chain, eventually people stop buying from you. So you will get frozen out of the supply chain. So you need to do faster, because when you do it earlier than everybody else, then you will actually have competitive advantage over certain people, because you are still able to sell to the Euro market, US market, and then especially you will have the ability to improve margin, because right now many countries are still willing to pay premium for sustainable product, for still willing to pay more money for premium item, but maybe at the time 10 years later when traceability become very common, people no longer pay premium for that. So it would be good to at least implement now. There will be some cost, but you can make premium money out of these things, so you can still sustain. Don't until one day you get frozen out, then you don't have sales, but you still have to do, you still have to invest, then there will be a problem. So you better start faster. So how digital traceability can address the issue? So normally, what happens to consumer is every day when they go and buy something from the grocery, they buy something from the supermarket, actually people doesn't have a way to check whether the thing is okay or not okay. They can only refer to the packaging, they can only refer to the information printed on the packaging, but they have no idea where the thing is coming from. That's why we need to start traceability by connecting every single step of the journey. So eventually we can build trust, see the beginning and know the story of where the thing coming from. However, the thing is about right now the supply chain is very complicated. So it's actually cross to everybody, and people are not able to really trace. So conventional way of maintaining everything in the Excel, maintaining everything in the spreadsheets can no longer handle this kind of complicated supply chain. So what the industry needs is actually a system. So this could be company level, this could be industry level, that they are able to have the traceability information collected from all your stakeholders. If you are a big company, can say, you can have your own system, then ask your supplier to actually report to you all the traceability information. Then eventually you are able to map out the journey of your product. But there are a lot of SME, same like Malaysia, same like Thailand, with a lot of SME. So when we are dealing with SME, then you need maybe your industry, for example, the rubber industry, or for example, the textile industry, people are crossing the supply chain, then they might need to work together so that they are able to have the information across the supply chain to report to the repository to handle the traceability for you. Because the reason why we have to do that is, this is a common issue along the supply chain. Everybody might have that information. Supply chain have a certain information, manufacturer has a certain information, retailer has a certain information, buyer has a certain information, but they are not talking to each other. So when they are not talking to each other, then it will be impossible for you to do your supply chain traceability, because you have no idea where the thing coming from. So what traceability, especially on the supply chain layer, eventually what you need to achieve is a way for everybody to be able to talk to each other, so that you are able to trace the thing from the beginning of the product, then all the way until the end. So which means from the farm, from the manufacturer, from the transportation, warehouse, retail, consumer, each of them is able to communicate with each other and get the information that they need to achieve. Then eventually the traceability process will start with we need to have the unique ID on all the products, which we call the serialization. Then you will be able to handle the aggregation during the packaging. And then eventually we will monitor the inventory, we will monitor the warehouse, we will monitor the transportation, distribution, eventually until the end, which the consumer can verify the journey of the products. Okay. So to demonstrate how traceability eventually will show for the consumer. I have actually made some example. So this is one of the example. It's a QR code. So if you guys have a phone, you can scan it. So once you scan it, then you will see. But this is the example that I show a lot of events. So if you scan the website, then if you after the loaded, you can go to the bottom. Then there's a trace item. If you go click on the trace product, then you can see you have a lot of process starting from when even the durian start making tagging and when we are doing fertilizing, watering and everything. So this is how traceability could look like in the environment, which means you are not only having a QR code on the product. Having a QR code on the product, yes, but what is more important is what events have been tracked along the supply chain. So QR code is just the identifier on the product. So you know the unique identity of that particular product. However, it doesn't tell you the full story. So what have the full story is really important is how you can gather the information from every single process. Okay? So this is one example. So second example is even for the farming. Because in the farming, people don't claim about my vegetable is organic vegetables or they claim about my vegetable is special, things like that. But how you know it's really special, right? So then we need to trace on where the process of the vegetable is from. And right now, in terms of food labeling, so there is a regulation coming. I think this morning one of the speakers also mentioned about is the upcoming China regulations on this, which they also requested digital labeling coming soon. Because why China? Because that is one of our biggest exporting market. I think for Thailand is also the same. So they actually will. This is the implementation timeline. I think right now the tax enforcement is on March 16, 2027. So they will need to have the digital IDs on the product so that eventually, after you scan on the ID, you also show the origin of the product and all these things. I think that is one of the very important things. Everybody might need to start planning and start to use before the deadline coming in. Okay. So this is just a pretty much overview of how the traceability will look like. So if you guys have any other question, then feel free to communicate with me anytime. These 2 days I'll be around, and I might be at the booth or I might be here. So feel free to check out with me because it will be very difficult to brief through all the processes about traceability. So this is just an overview of what can happen. Okay. So what use cases for digital traceability? So in Malaysia, there are several use cases that we have actually done. So one of the use cases is for the halal traceability. So as we know, Malaysia is one of the important countries for halal supply chain. So I think Thailand also the same thing. So we actually have produced a lot of halal products. But in order to justify whether a product is halal, so then there are a lot of things that we need to trace. So not only on the general for safety like GMP. So after fulfilling GMP, in order to certify whether this is a halal product, then more indicators you might have to put in. For example, for meat processors, then you need to monitor on the slaughtering process, whether the slaughter process is done correctly. Or when you are storage of the halal products, whether you are storing the halal product together with the non-halal product, or even during the transportation, is the lorry only used for halal product or the lorry is not used for halal products? So these are the requirements as well that we need to reports. So then when we are doing the traceability, then we will actually put in all these important indicators when we are doing our supply chain tracing to ensure the process of halal supply chain will never get contaminated or will never get any kind of misconduct or actually people misuse the labels and all these things along the halal supply chain. So another use case that we have done for one of our pilot project in Malaysia is also for our certification institute SIRIM. Actually, they have set up a standard for how to do the farming. So from the farming, even from where the seeds is coming from, when you do seeding, and when you do the planting, and what fertilizer they use when you're doing the fertilizing, and whether meter on the temperature, the pH, and when you do the harvesting, until each of the packaging, you have the unique ID. So eventually people can trace on the traceability of the vegetables on whether it's coming from the right sources or when the packaging is, and whether the growing process is complete or not complete. And these are also another possible traceability, which is on the seafood, because for seafood it is also very important, especially for aquaculture. But because in Southeast Asia, sometimes we also will go Indian Ocean for the fishing. So for the Indian Ocean fishing, a lot of the people will come to places like Singapore, or maybe even some Thailand, some Malaysia for reprocessing before they export to US. So when they export to US, according to FSMA 204, you need to do traceability on the seafood. So then you need to comply to the global level of seafood traceability. Then just now as we mentioned, we need to monitor on the transportation of the good as well. That's why you will also be monitors on the logistics and transportation of the cold chain logistics. So to ensure, let's say this is a cold chain logistic, so the temperature cannot rise above a certain temperature. So the temperature of the transportation will be fully monitored, and also will be monitored based on the temperature, humidity, also on the routing, to ensure no additional stoppage to unnecessary areas, things like that. Okay. So this will be just a normal checking on the supply chain to make sure your driver is actually doing all the good pickups correctly, then they are also following the routes that you plan. Then you also have real-time update of your shipment, and then the receiving will be reporting to you as well. So this one is maybe a Malaysia case. I think Thailand doesn't have much of the palm oil. So because in Malaysia the palm oil also suffer the UDR, so that right now we need to report on the UDR of the sustainable palm oil, which means we need to trace even from the polygon of land. So how many tons of FFB is selected, which collection center we send to, which mill we send to, which refinery we send to, all these need to have traces in order to comply to the sustainable UDR. That's where the traceability will become important for the palm oil industry as well. Then this is finally our common industry. Even Thailand is much larger, Malaysia is small. So then this is also on durian, traceability for the tracking of the durian and all this. Okay. So I think it's the end of my presentation. It's a bit short. We welcome more questions. But I think the conclusion is traceability become more and more important to nowadays, especially when all the regulations start to come in and people start to regulate on the food safety on the supply chain, and the consumer nowadays with more and more awareness on they need to know more about the products coming from. So traceability become more important, especially even to help a company is to enhance the food safety. So is to support the sustainability, because as you know, scope 1, scope 2, scope 3 sustainability is coming. And then to build consumer trust, because they need to know where things coming from, and to ensure compliance, because there are so many regulations coming. So you really need to check your importing country what regulation is coming, so whether you need to do the traceability. And eventually, after you do all this, then you will help strengthen the supply chain, because you are buying from a lot of people, you are depending on everybody. So then, to survive in the supply chain, you need to make sure you are from right now strengthening your supply chain resilience by choosing the right seller, choosing the right buyer, choosing the right partners, so that you will not disrupt it. If there are any new regulation come up, suddenly I can't buy things from this country already, suddenly I can't buy things from this company already, then my whole operation disrupted. So you will be start to strengthen the supply chain resilience by adopting traceability of your supply chain. So then I think the last one will be investing in traceability. It's also cementing the future of our food system. Okay. So thank you very much, and hopefully my presentation today is good for everybody, and I think I still have time. I can welcome any questions if you have, or we can communicate later somewhere in the hall. Thank you.
So for the first time that we want to choose the supplier, we have to check first. They have the information or traceability, right?
Yes, if let's say you are supplying to let's say you are a manufacturer, you produce a rubber product, exporting to Europe, definitely you need to check the supplier. If your supplier is not able to give you traceability needed,
So
then you can't.
I have to check to the farmer, and the farmer they use the fertilizer, so we have to get that information as
Yes.
well.
To a certain extent, yes. Yeah. So as I mentioned, for example, for the EUDR, you need to know exactly where the land you're planting. So for land that is less than 4 hectares, you only need to know the coordinates of the land. For any land more than 4 hectares, you need to actually get the land map at the polygon of your land fixed, then submit to supplier. So if you are a factory, then you are getting the goods from 20 different farmers. And these 20 different farmers, in order to comply to EUDR, you need to have the coordinates of the land before to collect the data, and then only you can submit to the EUDR. So the answer is short, yes. If your customers request for the traceability, then you will need to ensure your supplier also must have.
Difficult.
Very difficult. So it will be very challenging for a single company to actually do this. That's why just now we are mentioning about you might need how to say industry level kind of collaboration or even government kind of collaboration to actually do this. So for example, just now we mentioned about the EUDR project we done in Malaysia. It's actually driven by a state government, which they have 50,000 farmers. So in order for small farmers to comply to this, it's impossible. So they have to drive an initiative driven by the government to ensure all the small farmers to have them to reports of whatever they do, and eventually there might be a few big manufacturers that export to Europe to also work together on this fund operation. It's very, very difficult if one company wants to achieve it. It can only be achieved by a collaboration of the whole ecosystem. Yeah, I hope I answered the question. And even worse, I think will be, I think this is the worst case that we have faced. And until today, actually not everybody have a very good solution yet, which is on the circular economy. Because the producer is the beverage company, but bottom is the recycle factory. The recycle factory and the beverage company, they don't work together. So when this happens, it's truly, truly challenging. If you want to do circular economy, you sell your Coca-Cola and this thing, then you need to know how much aluminum can has been recycled. And then if you are buying the packaging again, how much aluminum has. This is the most challenging one because they are from different industries. Right now what we do see is some converter, they start doing the processes, the converter will do the job for for example, the food manufacturer and beverage manufacturer, because the converter will try to recycle as much as possible. Then they have a percentage of how much recycle they use. Then they convert into packaging, they sell to you, and they'll tell you about this packaging is how many percent EPR. That is
their whole business.
yeah. So for packaging company become a whole new business. Is now they are fighting on my packaging is have a better EPR and this packaging has lower EPR, so you can buy mine because have a higher EPR, things like that. So I think that it's become another business for the packaging and converter company, but it's still great, honestly. So yeah, so this is one of the even the other thing to achieve, because this is not just to from A to Z, this is from A to Z to A again. So this is the challenging one. Yeah.
About the ESG platform, can you give an example and or SME?
Sorry.
ESG
This one I think will be a little bit complicated to explain here, but I can actually show you later if somewhere in the hall, or we can go to the other side. In Malaysia, we as a traceability company, we do under the support of our government, as you mentioned on the halal supply chain, that we have built a traceability platform that allows multiple stakeholders to work together. I can do a demonstration to you somewhere later, but that will help to know how SME are actually working together on this. Yeah. Or we can actually exchange contact later, so we can always have a online meeting. I can do the demonstration to your company also. Any other question? No, I hope this is not too scary for a lot of people. Yeah, but this is the truth, but not today. It's 5 years from now, 10 years from now. But we need to get ready on it. Rather than wait until we frozen up, then that will be too late already. Yeah. Okay. So if no more question, then I will. Thank you everybody. Thank you.
Thank you Mr.Tay แล้วต่อไปนะครับก็เชิญคุณรัฐพลนะครับมอบของที่ระลึกให้กับวิทยากรครับ